Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iterate, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy.
Hey, Miguel Iterate back here on the Lights Out podcast. There's the MMA detective, Mike Davis, and we're here for something new. We're going to try out a little bit of a deep dive on historic events kind of thing. We're going to take the focus off of the actual fighter or a fighter and go through the career and actually pick out one event that had a lot of historical fights and, you know, maybe a couple of events and talk about those. And Mike, who do you think we got to start this off?
Wow. All right. So the podcast is changing. We all know that. Like if you listen to our first few interviews, they're much different than how they're done now. And if you listen to like 10 interviews ago, there's some subtle changes that took place as well. So in essence, we're just trying to add to the podcast as well as allow the listener at home to kind of understand that there were some historically significant things that took place that might not get the credit it deserves, or maybe the light isn't shined on it the way it's supposed to. And we're just kind of trying to bring that to the forefront. And whatever takes place in this interview with Monte Cox, it's probably going to be much different 5 or 6 interviews from now. It's just we got to kind of feel where we're going to go with it. It's going to be a permanent segment of the podcast. It's just how it's portrayed.
Yeah, so we're going to pick out some extreme challenges. Can't get any more historical than that. We're going to go way back into the 90s for them. I don't know how many we're going to get to cover. I got a feeling we're going to cover very few. And then we're going to get into talking, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And, in regards to plugs, September 18th, Tampa, Florida, I'm World Class Grappling. I'm hosting that with Carlos Diaz and Armando Garcia. And then October 9th, I am in Orlando, Florida. Please come out, say hello. Orlando, Florida, we're at the Olympiad. Both events, if you're a jiu-jitsu guy, you like that ground karate, get, register on Smooth Comp and, please say hello at the event.
And once again, I'm going to plug our boy Keith Mills and his Declaration of Independence. This is part 1 I'm holding here. It's a series that I think will get up to part 4 at least. And it's just a history book jam-packed with pictures of MMA from his career as a photographer and amazing stories, amazing quotes. So well worth looking at. That's a Declaration of Independence. Check it out on Amazon and out there on the net. You can order it for yourself. Nothing like having a real book. And without further ado, let's go to a man who's contributed to this sucker, and that's Monte Cox. Hey, Miguel Iterate here, Lights Out Podcast, MMA detective Mike Davis, and we are joined by, we hope, unusual suspect, right? Monte Cox. And Monte's making a return. He's been here a couple of times to do some, this is his 3rd time back, and Mike, why don't you tell us what we got planned here with Monte, because this is a real treat.
All right. So in essence, how we break fighters down, we do pre-UFC, post-UFC, or even UFC. We just kind of, wander around those areas. With Monte, he's a manager and he's a promoter, amongst other things within the sport. And I went up to UFC 30. I included a different one after that. I went up to UFC 30. I didn't fine tooth comb them, but I just kind of glanced at them, and I picked a couple extreme challenges that did I say UFC? I meant Extreme Challenge. I apologize. I went up to Extreme Challenge 30, and I kind of worked my way back, and I picked out a few that are excellent conversation points. And we've got the promoter and matchmaker, Monte Cox, to talk to us about them. And even if Monte wasn't here, this episode would probably exist between Miguel, I, and Chris because of the importance and the historical significance that these events, are to the mixed martial arts industry. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, Chris is at the bare knuckle, and but he asked us to make sure that we got this done. So, hey, we do what he says.
I sent it to him, and he's like, "You guys are going to talk about that?" I go, "Chris, there's more we can talk about."
And that's what I was going to say. I know he wants to be here, but he can't be in 2 places at once. So.
Yeah,
Monte,
he's in.
Monte, how many shows?
He's a part of it.
How many? Right, Monte, how many shows have you promoted roughly?
when you add them all up, Extreme Challenge is what, around 250.
About
I
250.
did about 60 cage combats. I looked at these the other day. I did about 50 Extreme Challenge trials. I did 50 or 60 ice. I did 50 or 60 XFOs. And then I had lots of them that were just named after whatever.
Like adrenaline.
Yeah. And then I had shows that were, I was doing 3 weekly shows, 3 shows a week. And I would headline them with a Miletich fight or a Sylvia versus Rothwell. Still selling tickets and all that, but most of it was amateur stuff, but I'd throw a couple pro things in there because, we weren't sanctioned, so I didn't have to pay anything.
So
a bunch, 500 or more.
Right. So, all right, just so everybody at home kind of catches up with us, we did a career overview for Monte earlier this year, which we went pretty deep with that. This is going to be an Extreme Challenge just briefing because we can probably do a few of these. And I think in the future also, we're going to break down the list of guys that you would manage, and we're just going to get some highlights and just kind of knock that out. So, ladies and gentlemen at home, expect about 35 to 40 appearances for Monte.
Yeah, spread out over 3 weeks.
Yeah, right. So we're going to kick this off with April 18th, 1997. So Monte had the Quad Cities Ultimate. You did a few of those shows, and you quickly understood that it was going to have to be much larger than that. You were way ahead of your time in regards to forethought and thinking and positioning in regards to promoting grassroots mixed martial arts shows. And in Waterloo, Iowa, April 18th, 1997, Extreme Challenge 5 took place. It was on paper, it appears that there's 2 4-man tournaments happening that day. Now, I'm not sure if you were going to headline the next event with those 2 fighters or if they were supposed to headline that day. But, Monte, please.
It didn't happen. It didn't happen. Extreme Challenge 5 was a 2-day event. Why it's listed as a 1-day and all grouped together, I don't know. But that was my very first attempt at going back to back, and I did it because I had such high level 4-man tournament competitors. I didn't want them to fight twice in the same day, so I thought it would be fun to do the first round and do some things there, and then come back the next night and finish it up. And I added individual fights, that we stuck in here and there to make it a full show. So
the first bracket is Shoney Carter versus Andy Sanders.
Correct.
And Dave Monet versus Laverne Clark.
Correct.
3 out of those 4 made UFC appearances.
Yeah, and Andy Sanders was really good.
Yes, he was.
He wasn't a bum. He was good.
The second tournament consisted of Dave Strasser versus Kaz Daniels and Jesse Jones versus George Shermer. And Jesse Jones, although he never made a UFC appearance, he's 15-5. And I think he got out of the sport too soon because he absolutely must have been on the UFC short list.
Oh, no doubt. He had, back then, the TKO was a big deal.
Yeah, in Canada.
Yeah. And that's where he'd go over and they'd go, oh my God, this guy is something. And so we thought he was one of the best we had. And everything was going pretty well. And where he ended up leaving, we had a show in Omaha at the Casino Harrah's there. He was, I for the life of me, I can't remember off the top of my head who he was fighting, but the guy wouldn't, he was taking him down or he wouldn't go down. He wouldn't fight. I don't know, but he got real frustrated. And God, this could have, maybe it was Shoney. I can't remember.
It was Shoney Carter.
Okay. Because
he quit from frustration.
Yes. And he wanted to get it to the ground, but he couldn't get Shoney to the ground. And so he ends up on his back and the ref is telling him he's got to get up. And finally, reluctantly he gets up. The next time he goes down, Shoney throws him down and backs out. he gets up, but the third time he just goes, that's it. He turns, he taps, and he runs out of the ring. I never saw him again.
I think that was Extreme Challenge 27 off the top of my head.
Yeah, but that's what happened. That's what happened to him. And he was 100% in the gym, everything else. That was the one that Jeremy Horn was telling me, this guy, you got to watch him. He had great hands. He was super fast. He was good jiu-jitsu, not a great wrestler, but he didn't care if he got taken down. So yeah, I expected him to win that tournament.
So Shoney Carter, for everybody at home, very rarely would you ever see Shoney like out of shape. Now, he might not have been like the front runner in the first round, even maybe round and a half, but he was so persistent that he eventually broke you. And he was unorthodox. He's just a southpaw, so he's kind of a strange guy to fight to begin with. And, sometimes when guys get their ass kicked in a way that's so bad, you look to the guy next to you and you go, yeah, the likelihood of him showing up in his gym again is very low.
Yeah.
So is that what took place here?
I think he's at his hometown. He's expected to do well. And Shoney was kind of mocking him. I mean, because Shoney doesn't care about going to the ground. He would have stayed there. And normally I would have expected Jones to stay up with him because his hands were good. But it just ended up a weird thing. He ended up wanting to go to the ground, and Shoney, because he wanted to go to the ground, just wouldn't. He refused to do it. And so I think in front of everybody, it just made him look bad. And he was very young, by the way. He was early 20s thing. I think the first time he fought for me was 19. So he probably wasn't more than 22, 23 is my guess. Very young. And so that adds into it also.
So this is just a sampling of how this podcast is going to go. In essence, we're talking about Extreme Challenge 5, and one of the combatants, it's an interesting historical side note that took us to, I want to say Extreme Challenge 27. It's literally off the top of my head, but I'm like 95% sure that is. And I know, Miguel, I'm not supposed to say these things unless I'm absolutely sure, but I'm right there. So
I could clean some of it up because I've been doing a little bit looking up. So he fought Jesse Jones fought Shoney Carter and was submitted by frustration on Extreme Challenge 16. Now Monte, he came back and did fight on 25 and then Anthony Macias on 44 for you. But okay. I think he was already kind of showing himself in between. Horn bought him by hook and shoot too. I got to meet him. He fought for us, and I thought he was spectacular also. But you never know. I think he was from Horn's neck of the woods down in Nebraska or wherever.
He was, but he quit training, and so by the time he came back, he was walking around at 210. I mean, I do remember now when he ran out of the ring, he's a 170-pound fighter at that time, all cut up, no waist. And I do remember seeing him at a show that I had in Omaha. And most of those are actually Council Bluffs, but right there, they're across the bridge. Right. And I saw him and did not recognize him. He was so big, like 210 at least, not fat, just had gotten huge. And I said, you ever gonna, and all that. I don't know about 25, but I know in 44 real quick, that was the one that came 3 days after 9/11. And I had a big show. I had 3,000 tickets sold, and I don't think I sold another one. I mean, I had all the big stuff coming. Also, I had gotten there the day before. I got there on the 10th, down in Louisiana. And then we had the 9/11 happened, and all of the flights were down. Well, almost all of my people were being flown in. So all of a sudden, I'm in trouble. I got all these tickets sold, even if no one else comes, still made a lot of money. And guys started driving. Joe Dirksen drove 26 hours from Winnipeg Tim
Wow.
Sylvia and Tony Fricklin drove. They swung by and picked a guy up in like Champaign and drove 22 hours. That's what I had. People driving from all over the place. And I already had there from the locals, I had Rich Clementi fighting. I had Macias, I had actually a great fight. I had a guy there that was like 6'9" to fight Sylvia. And then he ended up not fighting, and Tim didn't get a fight on that one. But that's where Jones, I had Jones, Dunn, and someone else that came from Omaha. They grouped up. Tim and Fricklin and the kid from Champaign came down together. So it was just one of those. But that was the last time Jones fought for me, and he did it as a favor.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's start at the beginning of the tournament. Shoney Carter beats Andy Sanders. And Shoney Carter, his first extreme challenge was against Laverne Clark, where he gets knocked out in the opening exchange with an uppercut, which, Miguel, if you could please look, I believe that's at Extreme Challenge 4. And it's a week. Was it 3? Then I'm off. I'm way off. He fights in Extreme Challenge 3, gets knocked out. He fights in Extreme Challenge 4. This is Extreme Challenge 5. Extreme Challenge 4 is a week after 3.
Well, we didn't wait long.
No, you didn't wait long.
You don't get to 500 shows by giving weeks up. You gotta hit them every week. But
for sure.
That Extreme Challenge 3 had Brian Johnston. It had Alan Goaz. I had just started. That was my 6th show. And I was already bringing in guys like Goaz and Severn. Yeah. And I jumped right into it. And back then there weren't enough shows. So guys like that with big names, I could get them on my little shows.
Just to put a little perspective on there, February 15th, 1997, Extreme Challenge 3. February 22nd, 1997, Extreme Challenge 4.
Shoney fought on both of those.
And they took March off.
Good.
Probably didn't really take March off, just shelved the Extreme Challenge name until April 18th. So 3 shows in 3 months.
Right. So let me kind of come full circle. I don't like to speak about things that are not on my notes. I've been doing that. And I've gone, Miguel, we're going over 2, but I've at least pronounced the names correct. So that's where I'm at with this.
Okay.
But so, I wanted to ask you before you get into it, you mentioned Andy Sanders in the start of this tournament. And Andy's a guy who you like you said, you gave him props. He was a talented guy. But why don't you think he was a Militich guy, and then there was some type of falling out? Is that something you can talk about or shed some light? What did he fuck up?
I don't really know about the falling out, but I know the problem with Andy. Andy was very talented, but he was very picky. He told people, I'd rather be 30-0 and fight 30 bums. He didn't care about being a world champion, didn't do that. He goes, I just want to have a great record, and it's going to, it helps me get girls and all that. And so you can imagine how that went over with someone like Jeremy Horn in the place and all that. Didn't go over very well. Mm-hmm. And it didn't go over very well with me either. And so every time you'll see Andy fight after that, he never gets any of those bumps. I don't let that happen anymore. and he kind of stopped fighting, but he was talented. And then as the other shows came around, he would jump, and fight maybe on some different ones, I think. But that was the big thing. He had talent in the gym. He was right with everyone, but he just didn't have the fighting spirit that people had back in the 90s.
Well, if you do, what your motivation is, you say he's not a pro surrounded by pros. They're obviously going to notice,
Yes.
And by pro, I mean in the mind, because physically he could have been.
Correct. He wasn't like, for example, a Jason Black who was an amateur waiting for his turn, and we're at a show, and Steve Berger loses an opponent, and at that time Steve Berger was quality. We all knew it. And Jason Black goes, I'll fight him. And I look and I go, are you serious? And he goes, yeah. I didn't even hardly knew who Jason was at that time because he's just another Militich guy in the gym. And he went out and beat Berger. And I was like, wow. And then of course he goes on to win his first 20. But I mean, that was the attitude that guys had. We didn't turn fights down. It just wasn't, Pat didn't do it. And so no one else wanted to be called. So that was the Andy situation.
Okay, gotcha.
So Shoney and Andy, and Monty, correct me if I'm wrong. Are these 12-minute rounds with the 3-minute overtime?
No, I didn't like that. How did I do it?
Well, Monet and Clark ended at 5:51.
Yeah, I want to say we started doing, I can't remember if we did the 10 and 5 or we did, I got to tell you, boy, that's hard to remember. I mean, that's a long time ago.
And you had different kind of, you also evolved. Like, so we're not talking about something that was one way and went to the other. You constantly evolved until you kind of normalized the situation where everybody was happy. So
is it possible that there was straight 15-minute round all the way through?
I know what it is now. Were there any decisions in that one?
A split decision at 15, Carter Monet. Kronquist and
were they
Mayfield.
It was 12 and 3.
Yeah.
It was 12 and 3.
No. It's a 15-minute period.
Yeah, 1 15-minute period is what I think. Because Kronquist and Mayfield ended at 13 minutes.
Yeah.
With a stoppage, and it was 1 round, 13 minutes.
15-minute period.
So
Now remember, this is evolving from when we started. That was only a year earlier. No time limits.
Right.
And that's how it started. There were no time limits. And so we evolved to say, we got to put a time on this because the man from Chicago that Pat fought, Matsumoto. Matsumoto was winning fights in 20 minutes, 23 minutes, because he would get killed the whole time. And the other guy just couldn't throw any more punches, and he'd roll him over and beat him. That's how he beat Mark Hansen. No one was going to beat Mark Hansen back then, and Hansen beat him like you wouldn't think a man could live through it, and just couldn't lift his arms anymore. And Matsumoto rolled him over and just started hammer fisting him and won. So we started thinking, this no time limit is not, that's not going to work. We're going to have to come up with something better than that. And so we started with 15 minutes.
So for those that know, Mark Hansen was one of the original trainers at the Militich Fighting Systems.
Yeah, he finished 7-1. He was amazing.
He used to, if you look at the early Pat Militich fights, he's always in the corner. I sent this picture earlier to Miguel to confirm his name, and Miguel got it right away.
I'm a Hansen fan. Hansen showed up in Indiana a couple of times cornering. You don't forget Mark Hansen. You know what I mean?
The big man. He went and won that Mars tournament.
Yeah.
Remember the Mars before Mars, they had the Shooting Stars, and it had guys like Leidick and guys like that in it that people knew. And he went through all of them in the first round, thumped 3 people without any expression. And I mean, he was a bad guy. He could have been a UFC champ, no doubt.
Well, he was not only a tough guy, but the way he was able to kind of walk the people he's cornering through situations was also very special. I mean, I don't think we should discount that because he was a very high ring IQ.
Yeah. He's a captain.
I'll tell you right
then. He was a cop then. That's why he couldn't they wouldn't let him fight. They decided, you got to pick and choose.
No, if he had decided to fight,
yes,
we would never have seen Tim Sylvia with a UFC belt. If in all likelihood, because it would have been Hansen first.
And Tim would say the same thing.
Really?
Tim, yeah. Oh my God, Hansen would. It was just a different level of person at that time.
Yeah, Tim's a tough guy. Hansen was an athlete too. You know,
Tim worked hard to get where he's at, and Hansen may have been born with certain physical attributes that many people just aren't born with.
and
You know, and combined with dedication and discipline, I mean, you've got the world in your palm.
When Hansen was playing football, he bench pressed 600.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and you know, Pat, you know, he and Pat Miletich met and they fist fought each other in the park. But that's for later.
How'd that go? Well, that wasn't extreme.
Yeah, that was it the pre-fight? All right, so let's go to the second fight on that card because.
But wait, let me ask: Extreme. Who's reffing? Who's reffing Extreme Challenge 5?
I think Todd Fredrickson then.
Okay,
Todd Fredrickson is refereing. Yes. Okay, and he is a referee that Monte would fly to some of his events because he was just so consistent. And that's 90% of it. Like you need a consistent referee that you know how he's going to react.
Well, and the truth is, and you're right, I would, but I needed someone to take my cage. So like when I fought in Salt Lake, I had Todd drive the cage from Iowa to Salt Lake City through the mountains in the snow and stuff. I didn't fly him, but I did let him drive.
He got there. So, and let me just kind of paint the picture here. This isn't your standard cage that these guys are fighting in. Monte, in essence, had a boxing ring that he had a cage built around, which included like a boardwalk, like a platform around it. Why didn't you invest in a cage rather than constantly trying to modify a boxing ring?
Well, I didn't constantly. I had the same cage. What I did is I didn't know what to do. A lot of the people, like in Battle of the Masters, they were all doing boxing rings. And I said, you look at UFC, this cage, there weren't many people with cages then. There weren't many shows, but there were not cages. So I said, I'm going to build a cage for my third fight. And they had to build it live. They put poles in the corners of the boxing ring and then actually brought just fencing wire and strung it across and hooked it and just kept doing it. They didn't get done with it till like 30 minutes before the show start. They're still out there doing it. Every time I come out, it was at a baseball stadium, but that's how they did it. And then they had to take it all apart and the next time put it all back up again. And we did that a couple times. And I said, guys, it's got to be a better way because it's a 5-hour setup. They said, well, I guess we could like prefab it and have these. And I go, there we go. So we did that, and I had spent money on it, and it worked. And a lot of the places I was doing shows were small casinos where you could only get 800 to 1,000 people in, and I'm filling them. So I don't want some big giant cage. And the only thing I had seen was like the UFC's 25 or 30 foot across monster and
too big.
I guess I don't know exactly why. It wasn't broke, so I didn't fix it. I just kept going with that cage.
And I think I've seen a few events later on where the cage got higher as well. No, like there was like
it didn't.
Was it about 10 feet tall?
It was only 8 foot tall.
Was it 8?
And they had bars that ran across the top, across. Yeah. And then I got it changed from across. Actually, it was the wire went across in an X, and in the corners there were 2 bars in all the corners. So I mean, if someone would have jumped, a tall guy, he would have hit that.
Oh yeah, you can't have Randleman jumping around in there.
No, he headed him, Well, but that's what I had at the time, and then I wrote the law for the state of Iowa. And I put in they didn't want everyone coming in and doing shows. They didn't trust anyone. They didn't want someone throwing up a cage in their backyard and holding an event. So it had to be held in Iowa in a 20 by 20, 8 foot high polyurethane vinyl cage, which I just, as luck would have it, that's what I had. So I was the only one legally able to do it. Anyone else had to get a variance to run it. I actually believe that's still the law. We just kind of don't follow it.
Yeah.
I don't think they've ever changed it.
Because back then you said about prefabbing it, but like now you could probably like there's catalogs where it's like you can order a cage, certain foot,
through
this, that, and the
China.
other stuff.
You get it from China.
And they just print, auto print them or whatever it is nowadays they do. But you could crank them out. You might be able to get one for $3,000. I don't know.
Yeah.
But back then, you're talking about like a $15,000-$20,000 investment to get a full on octagon.
Absolutely.
It was, and no one ever said that I wasn't cheap. I was tight on my money. When we ran those shows, we always, I always use as an example, my very first show, I drew just over 8,000 people. You know how many comp tickets I had?
Yeah, none.
2.
3. 3. And that's, I always say I've never made money off a comp ticket yet, so I'm not really interested in them. But I don't like giving away tickets. I really don't. And I've gotten better as I've gone along, especially if I'm getting the alcohol or something, I'm getting something from them. But why is it the people you give stuff free to like that, then they never want to buy it? You'd think at some point they'd say, oh, you've given me the last 3 shows. Why don't I buy this one? I've never heard that line.
No. So the second fight in the tournament, Dave Manet versus Laverne Clark. Both made UFC appearances. Dave Manet, future 185-pound champion, UFC champion. And Miguel Monty, do you remember how this fight went down?
I don't remember that much about it. What I remember most was I thought Laverne Clark is going to kill this guy, because I just watched Laverne knock out Shoney in 9 seconds, and I know Shoney was good, and I watched Shoney earlier, and I'm like, boy, Laverne may be one of the best guys around. And I had never seen Dave Manet before. I got his name. When you're doing shows, you become friends real quick with all the gyms around Minneapolis, Milwaukee. All those people call you because they want you to put their guys on the card. And I got that's how I got Dave, and I didn't know what he was. So I don't remember exactly how it went. I don't think it was long, because when Laverne lost, he usually got submitted. He made mistakes. He was a mistake guy.
Yeah, he lost by a triangle. And the thing about Laverne is, okay, so I watch as many of these fights that we're talking about on UFC Fight Pass and YouTube. And, I just kind of peek around the internet. There is no video of Extreme Challenge 5, unfortunately. But I do know Laverne Clark, and even in a one-sided loss, he's always got something very colorful to say. Like he's just one of those guys where, if this didn't happen, I would have won, or that didn't happen, I would have won. He's a character, man. He's a character that's heavy hands, and he's very seasoned. Like you're not going to get one by him.
When he was training boxing, he was the number 1 sparring partner for Antoine Eccles. Now, Antoine Eccles fought Bernard Hopkins twice for the world title and gave him a run. Antoine was a stud. And when Laverne was training him, he was on point. I mean, his hands were perfect. He was in shape. And we'll talk later, but that's how he was when he fought in the 8-man tournament down the road. He was just got done getting Antoine ready for Hopkins, and he showed up like a whole different guy.
So Laverne loses to Dave in a triangle choke, which gives you the finals. Shoney Carter, future UFC vet, Mr. International, he'll tell you that. Yeah. And Dave Manet, actually, I think at this time, Shoney went by Hollywood.
I know.
Hollywood Shoney Carter, if my memory serves me properly.
I know the way he dressed was not nearly as outlandish as it became.
At this time, it was kind of like a Kill Bill outfit. It was mostly yellow and kind of like black stripes on the side. And it was something out of Samurai Sunday. That's kind of where it started. And then it kind of morphed into, a Playboy type guy.
City. He won't keep sequins alive,
So Dave Manet and Shoney Carter fight to a split decision. I would pay big money to watch that fight.
Yeah,
So,
that was a really close one. I remember it didn't matter who they picked. Someone was going to be upset because they both of them fought to win, and this was one of the very starts of me doing judging. One of the first shows, might have been the first show. And I have to look back, but when I first started, there were no judges because I couldn't get anyone to come into town to fight, Militich and all these studs if they also thought they had to beat the ref or whatever and judges. And so I said, look, you can come in here and fight. If you don't get submitted and clearly lose, you're going to get a draw. And that's why you see Jeremy with 7 draws and Pat with 5 draws and all that kind of stuff. You could win every second, but it's still a draw. But in this one, we had a split decision. So that might have been my very first one where I tried to use judges.
Okay. Yeah.
But I remember it was really close. And because what comes to mind is thinking, damn it, I should have kept it with draws because a draw would have been appropriate for that fight. It was so good.
Right. Especially you looked at the trajectory of both guys. Yeah. In terms of their body of work, Shoney's probably got 100. I shouldn't say probably.
Almost
he absolutely surpasses 150 MMA fights, even though he's probably around the 100 mark. And he's probably got another 100 kickboxing bouts. And Dave Manet, he's got to be close to 100 MMA fights himself.
Yeah, he wasn't as busy as the other guys I had. I would say and I don't know, I haven't looked for any. I would, if I had to guess, I'd say 60 or 70. I don't think he got that
might be closer to 80.
Really? I don't know. I didn't look, but he was not one of my busier guys. He was, he would fight and then take some time and then fight again. He liked the big stuff. Like when they did what was the one in Kuwait?
The Kuwait tournament. Yeah.
Warriors War.
Warriors War.
That was Dave all about, he was a chance for him to go and fight against the best in the world, all in the same thing. That was Dave. He was excited. And then he won. He should be excited.
What's his record at? He's looking him up right now.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's got a handful of undocumented fights that aren't on his record, but he comes up as 47-17 and some draws and stuff.
65,
so
yeah.
About 65.
It's 65-70. Okay.
Yeah, he just wasn't as busy, and that's the only reason I thought that is he didn't. And then when he became a UFC champ, he you didn't fight much then. They were only doing like 6 shows.
All right, so let's point out the gold that just came out of Manny's mouth. He wasn't as busy, and the guy's got almost 70 fights.
Yeah.
Let that sink in. Let that sink in. That's bonkers.
Let me ask you how did that conversation go? Because Manet, Shoney's all bombastic, right? But Manet's kind of one of those quiet guys, and he's on the wrong end of his decision. Did he complain? But you said he thought he won, so how'd that go?
Yeah, he thought he won too, and I don't remember him making any scene. That was not Dave. He was not a guy to do that. He would just say, they mumbled, you remember? Bullshit, and walk away. You didn't really get into it, but you could never understand him.
Monty, we've got Dave lined up for an interview.
Oh, fantastic.
And I'm just praying to God, like we can just, come on, get some energy. Because his career is just bonkers.
He's so smart. He's very well read. He reads all kinds of stuff. So, not that this makes him smart, but we're riding in the car and I'll go, and there was like a really weird cloud, and it was black with, like a rain company, it's one of those say, oh, check that out. That looks nasty. And Dave starts telling me the particles that make it up and how it's formed. And I'm like,
those are cuneiforms. Yeah.
I go, Dave, who turned your button on? What are you talking for? And he goes, I talk. He goes, no one wants to talk about what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. So is this right around the time you start, you get a good look at Monet? He's got a win over Laverne Clark. He's got a coin toss against Shoney Carter. Is this when you start looking to manage, Dave?
No, I didn't remember. The first person I managed was Pat Miletich.
Pat Miletich.
And I only managed him because he made me. And that was back, in around that time, but he was it. I wasn't when we built him up to 10-0, I still wasn't managing him. He was headlining all my shows, but I'm a promoter. I don't want to be a manager. And then we're getting offline, but he and I went to Birmingham, Alabama, and we're sitting up top watching the Ultimate. And I tell him, I go, Pat, one day I'm gonna get you in this show. And at that time they only do heavyweights, so I'm just shooting off my mouth. And he goes, yeah, and he goes, and you'll promote it. And I'm like, well, I don't know about that, but I'm gonna get you in this thing. And I go, and I said, I won't take any money from you. I said, I agreed to manage him there. I won't take any money from you until you're in the UFC. And that's what happened. So these guys that I'm seeing when I'm going around, I make my mental notes. I write some stuff down. I just know now next time I come back to that area or I come to Omaha, or Dave was Minneapolis, I want Dave Monet on my card. And so I've got all these, I'm making these, when you're doing every other week, you go pick up 2 guys here, 2 guys there, a guy here. And pretty soon I got a really big list of fighters that I like. I like their style. I think they're exciting. And I want them on my shows. So I started doing that. And then there was a point where I had fighters that I was doing that with, and another manager was taking them and getting them crushed. They're 3-0 and all of a sudden they're getting crushed. And that's when I decided I'm going to be a manager.
So for those at home keeping score, he's talking about Phyllis Lee.
And I just couldn't watch him get all beat up. And so I just said, fine, from now on, I'll take care of him. And I didn't know anything about managing other than what I knew with Pat. But
you've been around the boxing world a long time,
but not as a manager. I was a newspaper editor mostly during that time. But I mean, it was I knew some things. I knew connections, and at that time, all those guys had been putting in my shows and giving them fights. They didn't have it wasn't like they'd say, I don't know, Monty, I don't know if I want you to manage me. There was no one else. So it's like, it basically wasn't, do you want me to manage you? It's, do you want a manager or not? And pretty much everyone goes, that sounds cool. Someone's going to help me get fights. And so that's how it all kind of gets started.
And bring them along, which is important. Yeah. It's a very important part of the game. So the second day of the tournament, I'm assuming these fights are all in one day if they're not split. I know there's
first rounds are all in one day.
Okay, well then here, I mean, we're not going to call this day 2. We're just going to call the other tournament then, for historical purposes. The second tournament that took place, Miguel, one of your guys, Kaz Daniels fights Dave Strasser.
2 of my guys.
That's one of your guys. And then we got George Shermer versus Jesse Jones. Miguel, why don't you let us know a little bit about Kaz Daniels?
Well, here, let's be clear. I never met Kaz because Kaz is a hook and shoot guy that was there for the legendary tournaments in the wood paneled room and stuff like that. And he was a hell of a fighter. He was definitely somebody I scouted, but I never got a chance to work with him. But yeah, I guess because of the hook and shoot connection, Strasser became my guy later. But Kaz Daniels was a really talented guy. Actually, I'll tell you everything I sort of pieced together. I don't know if any of this is really factual, but I think he was a male stripper.
He was.
And he made good money, long hair dude, kind of like a rock and roll, like kind of look, to him and stuff. knew how to fight, like it really, like definitely knew how to fight. Had great fights with Phil Johns and hook and shoot and stuff like that. But I heard a story about a duffel bag with like $30,000 in $1 bills and $5 bills from his job and stuff like that, you know. So he made money. He didn't need the fights, and he walked away with an 8-4 record and a hell of a boatload of UFC guys on his record.
Yep. Yeah, I can't remember. I remember where it was. It was at Council Bluffs, and a guy had lost, and Kaz had beaten him, and I went in and I said, you know, hey, you put up a good fight, and the guy's like, yeah, you know, and I said, you know, do you want me to just leave it at that, or do you want me to jab you a little bit? And he goes, what do you mean? I go, you just lost to a male stripper. And the guy's like, well, don't tell me that.
So you just, for those keeping track at home, that little tidbit of information that came out of Miguel, that's why he's invaluable. It's just those little things he just never, ever forgets and is always contributing that to our podcast. So Dave Strasser beats Kaz Daniels with an armbar. And on the other end, we talked about Jesse Jones and George Shermer, where Jesse advances in that fight, and Strasser and Jones meet in the finals.
Right. I was just going to say that Kaz Daniels then moved to Florida, and he called me. He under his real name. His real name has nothing to do with Kaz Daniels. It's completely made up.
Is that a stripper name?
Huh? Oh, that was his stripper name.
That makes it even worse.
He called me and he had it, and he told, and I have it, I know, on my phone, but he did call out of nowhere, and he goes, and I go, do I know you? And he goes, dude, it's Kaz Daniels. And I'm like, are you kidding me? He goes, yeah, this is my real name. So decided to throw that in.
That's
cool.
Fantastic. So Dave Strasser, Miguel, I mean, you used to go to that well quite often, and Jesse Jones fight in the finals where Dave wins with the key lock at 9 minutes, 24 seconds. Monty, what could you tell us about that fight?
Well, sure. The guy he was fighting was a student of Bob Shermer. It's actually
George was?
It's his nephew or cousin. And
so Combat Doe is Bob Shermer.
Yes.
You know, just historical footnote, Bob, and I'm going from my memory, fought Carlson Gracie Jr. to like a 30-minute draw at some point. It was one of the first Americans to take a Brazilian, the 30-minute mark without getting submitted. So this is his nephew.
Right. And Bob Shermer was Shoney Carter's trainer.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Did Pat Miletich work out with Bob Shermer at any point? That was the rumor.
Not train with them, but there was a little thing on. I'm going to tell it. So we're at the show. The first round ends, or the first day, and in between, and people are coming up to Andy Sanders because he lost and saying, "Dude, why don't you come work with a real group? Why don't you work with a real team, and and learn something, come up to Combat Doe and everything." So he goes back to Pat and he goes, Bob Shermer's guys are saying this stuff, and Bob liked to talk.
Yeah, for sure. He's going to inflate his own ego and Jim and company, of course.
They just picked up a win. And so Bob's sitting on the cage on the edge, and here comes Pat, and he goes,
Bob is about to find out there's levels to this game.
He goes, Bob, we're going to have a conversation in the cage. And Pat proceeded, I don't know, he tapped him 9 times, 10 times, but it was brutality. And he got up and just didn't say anything and walked away. And Bob, of course, Bob's a lot older at the time. And Bob's like, oh, these old bones, all that kind of stuff. And he's trying to get out of the ring. And here comes Jeremy Horn. He goes, next, and picks him up, lifts him up, and walks him into the cage and proceeds to repeat the whole.
Was this at that event?
Huh?
Was this at that event?
Yeah. And at the in-between.
God.
So
it was your intermission?
It was pretty, no. 2 days. So the second day in the morning, people are working out because the show's at night.
Oh,
And those guys came in. It was pretty good. And I'm a friend of Bob's. I like him and stuff. But that was, you're talking about somebody taking on two of the best ever.
That's interesting. I was gonna say you didn't treat George Shermer good because I know it's a 2-day show, but he went 0-2, lost to Kaz Daniels, and then took the other loss to Jesse Jones. That's Kaz Daniels and Jesse Jones back to back on a weekend is not a good day for anyone, man.
No. Well, but back then when there weren't that many schools, so where they were from, they had Shoney that was doing well, and there were other guys, and they're thinking we're as good at that time. The Militich is not Militich. It's still that's just the Davenport group, and so when they met at that point, that early in the sport, they didn't know what Pat's group was going to go on to be. And so they came down with their chest puffed out, and everyone did. Everyone thought, our school, same thing with Jeremy, with Jesse Jones and his brother, Matt Anderson, and those guys, they all thought they had it going. They had Steve Jenham, all there. So, I mean, that's kind of how it was. It was these patches of groups back then.
Okay, so let me interject. Miguel, I picked too many events. I think I've got 4 events. We've done almost an entire hour just on Extreme Challenge 5, which,
he predicted this.
Well, I
video doesn't even exist of this event, and I'm just like looking at it, and I'm like piecing it together in my head, and I'm like, well, this is one that I got to ask Monty about, like for sure, because it's so difficult to find.
Now, I can tell you at Hook and Shoot, we've got a couple of 2-day events that were done that are listed wrong on the databases and all mixed up. Good. And I can't get them right either, like in my head either, like to fix it. So it's broken on the database and in your brain. Yeah, it's like, I don't remember. I know the lucky lady was in there somewhere and, but the point is this show does look like there was more than just those 2 4-man tournaments. It looks like
I think there was a heavyweight tournament there as well.
I don't think a tournament.
Okay, Fulton just fought twice.
The others were just individual fights, one on one day, one on the other day. And I tried to always have at least one alternate fight. So if someone couldn't continue, I had someone to jump in. We're
talking about, Miguel, is I think Angelo Rivera lost twice. Travis Fulton fought twice. Angelo Rivera on it. And like I said, I'm going from my head. I'm not looking at this. Was also a combat duo student under Bob Shermer.
Maybe I always thought I was thinking it was 2. It could have been 3. You guys, that's why I say it's hard when they put them together like that. It's really difficult to know.
And it's 2 days.
I used to have all of my sheets that I wrote the results on. I had them from my first 100 shows. And somewhere when I moved, I lost those. But I could go back and there were old papers, that had all the results on them. It was pretty cool. But I did lose them somewhere.
Okay. So, and that's kind of where I was at with Miguel. It looks like a disjointed tournament. To me, it looks like guys just wanted to keep fighting. They had the opportunity, so they jumped in there a second time because of just some guys appear twice and some don't.
We had if you were healthy, the losers would fight each other.
That may have taken place.
That's what it was. I know that because I'm faced with trying to fill a complete show, and especially on the second day, all I've got is just the 2 finals or the 3 finals. I need other fights, so I did the third, kind of like the third place ones, and I could pick up 3 more, but sometimes the guys didn't want to go on, or if you got embarrassed or something, they didn't want to go on.
So now let me ask you, on this show too, there's a subject that, we've been touching on here on the podcast. So the main event or one of the final fights that lists as one of the last fights was Brian Dunn against Travis Fulton. Now, this is 98. So do you feel you got a real fight? They were friends and they probably had questionable fights later, according to what we've been looking at. But
I think this was before any of the garbage started. I really do. Because, Travis is first.
98 is early.
Yeah. Well, Travis's first 20 fights, he fought in the first 20 Extreme Challenges. He was the only guy that fought every single time. And he started out, he was just 18 years old. I don't think he had that mentality of faking fights. And Brian Dunn, if you know anything about Dunn and Horn and those guys,
Dunn was good.
They were brutal on each other, let alone, you know, I mean, when they trained and stuff, that was a crazy bunch. They'd choke each other out with extension cords and all that craziness, you know? And so I can't see Dunn throwing anything, you know?
It sounds like something in the novelty section that you would find. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah. So Extreme Challenge 20, Miguel, this is what's referred to as a segue. You had mentioned people doing fake fights. Dan Severn, although this is not one of them, headlines with Pat Miletich that ends in a draw.
Well, because
no judges.
We agreed not to do judges. But here's the big story on that one. This is a legit straight fight. I think Pat can win it. I really feel at the time with his striking and stuff, I don't think Dan, unless Dan can get him down and hold him down, he's going to have a lot of trouble. And maybe he could have. He did for a big part of it. But we're at the show, and it's already started. And Becky Levi, who was his corner and friend and partner,
some would call her an accomplice, but go ahead.
She comes to me and says, Monty, Dan just got an offer. He's got to go on TV in 2 days on Monday, and we can't have him go on with his face all busted up. So can we not punch to the face? And I go, no. I go, that ruins the whole thing. No way.
Would you cut your purse in half?
Yeah.
No. Okay.
Like, no, I'm not doing it. And she goes, all right, well, we thought we'd at least ask. So fights go on. Then here's Pat and Severn fighting. And I'm sitting there going, what's going on? You know, what's Pat doing? You know, he's not hitting him. He's not, you know, come on, man. And the fight ends, and I'm pissed. I mean, I thought we had a chance for something that was, we had 3,500, 4,000 people at an outdoor event at a park. And I'm like, man, that could have been what that could have done for the sport. Just a fight that like we could have put on. And so it's over, and Pat's walking back towards the locker room, and I cut him off. And I go, Pat, he goes, don't fucking talk to me. He goes, don't talk to me. And he's walking, what do you, he goes, and he turns, and he goes, God damn it, Monty. He goes, it fucked up the whole thing. It ruined everything. And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, me not being able to punch him. And I go, what are you talking about? You know, he goes, Becky Levi came to me and said, you guys talked and you agreed that you wouldn't punch, that I couldn't punch him in the face. And I go, Pat, no, I told her absolutely not. Of course you can punch him in the face. And he goes, what? And I go, they got us. I go, I did not say that. And he goes, son of a bitch. So, and that's how that fight went down.
Okay, so what happens with the pay when you sit down and?
I mean, we made a ton of money and everything like that. But and Dan
did you give him an earful?
10 times, but I was not happy. And if you look, he's not in a whole lot of other fight. I think I have him fight Jeremy down the line. When he fights for me going on after that, he's got a real chance to lose, you know, with the top guys. But yeah, Becky got us on that one.
So let me kind of frame this up for everybody so they kind of understand what's happening here. Pat Miletich is a future 170-pound champion. If you're listening to this podcast, I understand you already know that, but I've got to say it anyway. So he's a future 170-pound champion. He probably walks around, would you say about 190, 195, Monty?
185.
185. And Dan Severn is every bit of a heavyweight as you're going to find.
Yeah, 260.
Right. You're 245 maybe at this time.
We're walking around, yeah. He
98.
Olympic alternate.
For sure. And I mean.
But I think you're right. In August of 1998, if it goes down as a completely legit fight, you did what you had to do, which is put Pat in a spot to really make a split. Like if Severn wins, it's just another fight, but Pat really did have a chance at history there.
Well, and I
would have been amazingly notable.
Right. And Pat, because this isn't like Dan Severn when he's 60. I mean, this is back, he's not that far off of the ultimate and stuff like that. And and I really thought he had a chance. And the thing was, Pat said, he goes, Monty, he goes, he's not going to knock me out.
No, he definitely wouldn't.
For sure. He goes, I can wrestle enough and move enough. He goes, he's not going to do one of those, four heads in my neck chokes. He goes, I'm better on the ground than that. And he was able to get up and get out and get out from under him and all that. So we figured when we did it it was only a draw if you didn't finish. We finished. The only person who had a chance to finish that fight was Pat.
Oh.
And then
what were the conversations like afterward? Like not the day of the event, like the days later with Pat.
Oh, okay. He because we were tight. I mean,
for sure.
And when he found out that I didn't backstab him like that and handcuff.
That would have ruined your relationship. That would have been it.
It would have. Yeah. And so we were. It's for me, to be honest, I can remember just kind of saying, you got to give them credit. You kind of got to give them credit. They saw what was there, what was in front of them, and they found a way out. You got to
look at it too. Pat's got to mentally prepare and physically prepare for the main event. Any interaction between the two of you is going to be limited because you're also running the event.
Right.
So like they saw the moving parts. When I'm promoting an event here in Chicago, the communication that I have with the locker room is almost none because you've got your people doing that because you're managing, the event. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dan is slick.
I never saw him that day because the fights had already started. So I'm ready. I'm working as I go. I'm trying at that point. I'm kind of still learning, as I go. My first outdoor show, that in a field, a park, and I'm worried about people jumping the fence. I'm worried about everything, and so I didn't see him again until the fight was over.
Okay, and you had just said you're still learning, so let me kind of make some observations from my end in terms of growth. Monty, you're a boxing guy, and what surprised me in regards to your learning curve is you're really concerned about moving the event along, because not doing that is a killer. At this time, there were events in Chicago that were going to like 2 a.m. And it wasn't because, they had 35, 40, 50 fights. It was because they were so unorganized and not understanding of how an event is supposed to go that they would kill their own event just by extending it so long. So Monty keeps his event moving, and it's kind of like OCD type because you don't even allow the announcer into the ring to announce the winner at this point. No, you announce them coming in, you sit at your chair and you tell them, from the chair. And there's a little bit of pageantry in mixed martial arts because it's a show, or even combat sports. It's a show, and you were so concerned about meeting your timelines that you weren't even at this point allowing that to take place in the ring.
And most of the time I was the timer.
Yes.
I still do. Now I'm trying to get, if I got one guy I trust, but the reason I'm the timer is because the whole time I was doing shows, something good would happen and they'd come to me and go, "Oh, Monty, did you see that knockout?" And I'm like, "Oh, I was putting more water bottles in the locker room. Damn it." And it's like, I'm making the matches. How can I match people if I don't watch them? And so I said, this is what I'm going to do. And out of 500 shows, I have probably timekeep 450 of them. and the reason is you can't start without me. There's not 1 second going on without me. I got to ring that bell. So I see every second of every fight that I put on.
Okay, so we talk about historically, I mean, this is an MMA history podcast, so we talk about historically important fights. Monty, where would you rank the co-main event between Dave Menne and Shoney Carter as a rematch in regards to MMA history on the independent grind?
I mean, outside of, what the guys fighting for mega money and stuff like that, I would put that up and say that was the best fight in history for the money.
I think
no one else could have got a fight like that for that money.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen at home, go get yourself a UFC Fight Pass and watch Extreme Challenge 20, Dave Menne versus Shoney Carter. Monty, when you and I kind of had our pre-interview talk, my actual opinion of this is because when you look at both combatants and how they went at it, it's in a neutral location, because I think this is in Davenport. For some reason, I didn't include that on my note. And
yeah, it's in Leclerc Park.
Okay, so
big park.
Dave Menne's from Minnesota. Shoney's from the west side of Chicago. It's right in the middle. The non-stop action in this fight, it's incredible. It's about 10 years ahead of its time.
Yeah. It was just something that everybody, when you got 4,000 people, you're walking around, people are moving and stuff. When this fight was going on, you just saw everyone start to stop talking, and everyone all of a sudden got focused on that fight. And then in between, I remember, I'm the timekeeper there, and I remember hitting the bell, and all of a sudden the yell that went up for the end of that first round was like, holy cow, where did 20,000 people come from? I never heard anything like that. And I mean, everyone was into it. And then they come out for the, after that, and same type deal. I mean, everything goes quiet. And when they're fighting, it's completely quiet. And then just the roar of the crowd. I had gone to 3 5s then, didn't I?
Yes.
I thought.
You evolved. You talk about the evolution of Extreme Challenge, and just for everybody at home knows, Dave Menne wins. So Shoney Carter wins the first fight by split decision. I think this was a split decision as well, except Dave Menne won this. No. It was unanimous. I apologize.
No. On the Extreme Challenge 20, it lists a 1-round, 20-minute draw.
Yeah.
Oh, that is correct.
So you're on the third one already.
Same reason we did it for Severn. We kept it for everybody that you had to go. The same one.
Yeah. So go ahead, Mike. I was just going to mention there were a lot of draws on the card. There was and good guys. Fulton drew with Larry Parker. Larry Parker was a tough dude for that era. A guy that's going to be forgotten, really. Tyrone Roberts fought Brian Dunn. So Tommy Sauer was on that card.
He beat Munson.
Yeah, he beat Jeff Munson.
Munson. I think, Monty, you also have an event where David Dodd, who is a below 500 fighter, armbars Jeff Monson. I think Jeff might be his first MMA fight, first 3 or 4 fights of his, armbar in 45 seconds. Yeah. And it's incredible that one of the greatest submission artists in the world just gets manhandled by a guy that doesn't even have a 500 record at this time.
But at the time, when they were just starting out, on 20, here's a few quickies for 20.
Noe Hernandez, another forgotten guy.
Oh my God, he tough? Was he tough?
Yep.
I mean, no one wanted to fight that dude.
Just mean.
Yeah. And you know why he ended up? Why he quit? Because he fought Chuck Liddell in the UFC, and we thought Noe, I'll tell you, but Noe had some real mental issues, and he had to take medicine to calm him down so he didn't kill people. That medicine also took away all his aggression and all his anger, and he just became a shitty fighter that way. He didn't want to hurt anyone. And that's what happened. Very similar to what happened with Jens Pulver when he got on the meds for bipolar, he lost a lot of his aggression. It's hard, so.
Yeah. And it's an interesting story. The thing about Noe Hernandez, if you look back at that Chuck Liddell fight, right around there, the UFC's at 205, and you could see Noe Hernandez would have been 185 pounds. You know what I mean?
Noe fought Mark Hansen, and it took Hansen 13 minutes or something like that. And Hansen goes, "God damn!" He goes, "That's the hardest fight I've ever had." And I'm like, "You couldn't get it anymore. It's a cop and a killer, a criminal." It was just perfect. But back to 20 because we want to stay online.
Yes.
Travis Fulton went in that with a gigantic cauliflower ear. It had swollen up the size of an apple. I mean, it was you didn't even want to look at it. Every time that Travis would get on top of Parker, and if he would pull an arm away to hit him, he would reach up and grab his ear and squeeze it. And Travis would scream and wouldn't hit him and go back down. And then when he tried to pull up again, he'd grab it and squeeze it. And it finally almost tore off. It was just hanging. But I mean, if you would have just gone chink, it would have been gone. And it had blood and pus everywhere. It was, I never seen anything like it, but just saying. And that ended up a draw from the thing.
The Dave Benet Shoney Carter fight, just to kind of keep everybody online, or in line, I should say. At this time, there's a level of education that is happening with the audiences, and really they don't appreciate the ground till probably about 2002, 2003. And the Dave Benet Shoney Carter fight, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's all of, there isn't a single inch of that cage that wasn't used in that bout, and neither guy was bending. It was,
and both of them wrestled in college. Both of them had either, like Shudakan was what Shoney did, which all that stand-up stuff, and Dave did Muay Thai, and so they were all loaded. And I think I told you this part, but in the third round, there's about 2 minutes left, and they're about 5 feet away, and they both drop their hands. And Shoney goes, "What the fuck are you smiling at?" And Dave goes, "I'm smiling because I'm kicking your ass." And then they just back up and just start smacking. And both of them, they both looked like they were in a severe accident. The doctor told them both to go to the hospital. I know Shoney went. I don't think Dave did. I think Dave went to Dr. Jack Daniels for his.
Very good doctor.
He might be pretty good. I heard he's pretty good.
You met that guy. But yeah, that's what Dave did. And but truly one of the greatest fights I've ever witnessed live.
100%. 100%.
Amazing skills.
And because it was a draw, and like I said, I've got my notes in front of me. I've kind of just put these together in the last 48 hours, so I'm not as precise as I normally am. I believe it was a draw, and because it was a draw, Shoney kept the Extreme Challenge title.
Correct. He retained it, I think.
Who did he win that title when he beat Monet the first time?
No.
Or was it later on? I wasn't sure.
It was something else.
Okay.
Just to finish up your tie-in there with the Parker Fulton fight. So Fulton actually, the weekend before was at Hook and Shoot.
Yeah.
And he was there with Horn. Now, Horn fought a 30-minute grappling match against Mario Roberto, who's up in Minnesota as a jiu-jitsu coach now.
Pedro Sauer guy.
And then Fulton fought him in Mario Roberto's first no-holds-barred fight. And that went 30 minutes. And after that fight, his cauliflower ear was so bad that Horn and I went to a CVS, got syringes and drained his ear, like full CC, several full syringes of blood came out of the ear. And a week later, he's still fighting. So that's a little bit of Travis.
And all that stuff came back. Nowadays, no doctor in the world is going to let you go into a fight with your ear like that.
Yeah, no way.
And and for that one they did. What was the other? Oh, Brian Dunn. He's in. This is still. I'm staying on track because this is still
my man.
Challenge 20. Brian Dunn had a good friend named Jim Axtell. Jim Axtell was a super tough. Not a lot of skills, but at one time he also benched around 600 pounds. not chemically helped, but nonetheless strong. And those two, one drunken night, decided they wanted to fight the Roberts brothers. And they said, we're going to do it. We're going to do it.
Tyrone and Andre Roberts both made UFC appearances. Andre was like the first 300 plus guy. Tyrone Roberts is a 50 Fight Club member, mainstay with Monte Cox, and is one tough SOB. He is a forgotten footnote in the sport of mixed martial arts, refereeing in Iowa, currently working for the commission. Go ahead, Monte.
So they decided to do it. We put the show on in Harrah's, and for some reason Tyrone can't do it. Well, Axel goes ahead. He fights Andre, and as he puts it, Andre pushed his face through the cage like a cheese grater. He said he had marks and he looked like a well done steak, and he just killed him, right? And so, he bitched it, Dunn. And Dunn he became the ABC president. He just gave that up at the convention in Orlando a month ago. He was the ABC boxing and MMA president. Well, anyway, he gets a call from Axel, and he goes, Brian, Monty's putting on a show. He's got Severn fighting Pat. You want to go? And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, when you want to go? He goes, let's just go we'll go tomorrow. And so he picks him up and they drive to town. It's the day of the fight. And back then we did the weigh-ins in the morning. We didn't do day befores. Did them in the morning and then did it. And so he drives and comes and gets to Davenport, and he pulls into Walmart. And Brian goes, what are we doing in Walmart? He goes, if you're going to fight Tyrone Roberts, you might as well get a mouthpiece and a cup. And he goes, what? And then Jim goes, you're going to do it. You're not backing out, blah, blah. And he goes, all right, I'll do it. He had no idea. And he's weighing about 150 pounds. Tyrone is about 185. He's a bigger guy. And Tyrone beat Brian senseless, 14 minutes and 58 seconds. It took him 2 seconds to get to him. And he pounded him. It would have been stopped damn near anywhere else. And they get a draw. And so when they're holding up Brian's arm, I mean, he's just mangled, one eye shut. It's all that. And Tyrone's like, is this sweat? What's this? And nothing. He just couldn't, but it ends up, it's one of his more, he said it was a very satisfying draw, because it was not everyone, could hang in for a beating like that for 15 minutes.
Yeah. No,
so
crazy.
You're cranking them out, like you're cranking out extreme challenges, but you take a few months off. And October 17th, 1998 is Extreme Challenge 21, where it's an 8-man, 170-pound tournament. In the first round, you've got Dave Benet, Adam Johnson, Matt Hughes, Victor Hunsaker, Tom Schmitz, Shannon Rich, Dennis Hallman, Alan Mulring.
Right.
So the first round is kind of heavy on one side. It's kind of like a blue-red corner. It's more of...
But not intentionally. Matt Hughes was 1-0 at the time. He was my number 8 seed.
Really?
No one knew him at all, ever. He was 1-0. We knew that he was from Illinois, but we knew nothing. So he's in there. He's my number 8 seed. Shannon Rich had convinced me that he was 21-3, I think, at the time. So nothing's changed. And so I seeded him high. I had Hallman pretty high, but who did Matt fight in the first round?
Adam Johnson. He's just a journeyman.
But he came from, was it Texas? I think Texas, and he came out of there being something special with a great,
I think Hughes fought Hunsaker first.
That makes more sense.
Because Monet fought Johnson.
Okay.
Monet fought Johnson. I apologize.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I apologize. Yes.
Hunsaker was my number 1.
Thank you, Miguel.
Because he was coming out of California and he had a good record and stuff. And I mean, all these guys, I was just going by records. And back then, I would just call these camps and go, who's the meanest, baddest guy you got, at 170? And they'd say, oh, you need to get Alan Mulring or whatever, whoever it was. And Alan's a funny guy, but that's how these guys, that's how we put it together. So we got guys from California, from Texas. I'm bringing guys in from everywhere. So
Monet beats journeyman Adam Johnson, 52nd guillotine. Matt Hughes beats Victor Hunsaker, minute 39 KO. And Matt, you could see his hands. He hits friggin' hard, including at this stage in his career. Like that guy's a train. Tom Schmitz, armbar Shannon Rich in 25 seconds. I'm sure he just got lucky with that victory.
Well, and Tom Schmidt was out of Minnesota and was with Greg Nelson's camp.
He's cornered by Greg Nelson.
Yeah, and he's good. He was good back then.
But he's not Shannon the Cannon good.
No, he's not Shannon.
Of course not.
Didn't have experience.
Shannon was winning the first 24 seconds of that fight.
Yes. So for those of you guys at home, Shannon's got a very interesting record. I know Miguel could probably expound on it. Let's just say the three of us here, without talking, I can speak for all of us. Jeremy Horn is the most decorated, most fight veteran in walking the planet Earth right now. And Shannon Rich, although with more fights than Jeremy, I don't think could carry a spit bucket.
Yeah.
Miguel?
No. I mean, I don't want to dedicate too much time to Shannon Rich. 25-second loss to armbar to Tom Schmitz on that one.
Move on. There we go. Move on. There we go. Okay.
When some of those guys like Severn's an interesting case to me too when you consider those guys, because I believe, if Severn had come in, he still is probably going to be favored against Miletich. You know what I mean? It's just that he actually didn't want to give his all, is what it is. It's like he didn't want to have to be forced to give his all if the pay wasn't, what he was making there. And then all these other side conversations come. And this is a situation where he did get his opponent to take some of the edge off it. It's not, it's interesting. It's interesting to me. I don't know.
All right. So Dennis Allman beats Alan Mulring, first round, 2 minutes, 52 seconds. So this is where the tournament gets very interesting. And historically at the end, keep following us. It's incredibly important what takes place in the finals. So Matt Hughes and Dave Monet, both future world champions. Monty, I can't believe you had this. You've got a future UFC 185-pound champion. And you've got one of the greatest 170-pound UFC champions ever in the quarterfinals, and Matt Hughes wins a 15-minute decision.
Yeah, what a war! And Matt, at that time, Matt could out wrestle Dave, although Dave made it tough. Dave was a hell of a wrestler.
I think Dave got a couple reversals in the third round with like a few minutes left. So Dave never quit.
Dave at that time had a lot more experience. Matt only had one fight. Matt was just a wrestler that picked guys up, smashed, bam, bam, bam. That was Matt. And Dave took advantage of that. But Matt's strength and just balance, he was on top most of the time, and he hit so damn hard. And Dave is known for getting hit. He takes one to give one, or takes two to give one. Sometimes and he 10. Was getting hit hard. He was getting rocked. Yeah.
Now, at this point, was Monet fighting with the contact lenses, or was it because at some point they took the contacts away from him? He was blind, Yeah. That affects it a little bit.
We didn't there was no commission or anything, so I'm sure he wore it.
He wore contact lenses. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's follow this. So Matt Hughes just spends 15 minutes in a dogfight. And on the other side of the corner, you got to be like, yes. Like finally, you're gaining an advantage. And the thing is, Tom Schmitz, who beats Shannon Rich with an armbar, or beats Shannon Rich with an armbar, he can't continue. Yeah. So you push Shannon Rich together. What was the reason for him pulling out?
I don't really remember what it was. If I had to take a guess, I believe he came in a bit injured. Didn't want to not do the fight, and in the course of, even though it was quick, something happened, and he aggravated that injury and just didn't feel, and staring at who you're looking, staring at your opponent might have had something to do with it, but I think he was hurt.
So Dennis Hallman is Shannon Rich, to his credit, steps up and takes the fight against a very, very tough Dennis Hallman. And Hallman knocks Rich out in 44 seconds.
Yeah. Hallman was yoked. He was so big.
Yes.
And just shredded yoked. He was all of 185 to 190 by then,
Yeah, if he made 170, he actually told us on his podcast he juiced to make the 170.
He did.
To bulk
he
up for that.
self-admitted.
So he sort of admitted that he was getting big for this plan. Shannon, by the way, he ran the table on the first 40 seconds of that fight, just so you know.
Well, here we go. So, and a little side note, Dennis Hallman's interview, he also said Jeff Monson shot urine into his liver in order to beat a drug test. He said he wore a Whizzinator, which, Jeff Monson also did, and told ridiculously crazy stories about torturing Jeff Monson before and after practice. It is he didn't even want to talk about the fights. He wanted to talk about shenanigans. It is an incredible interview. One of my favorites.
Yeah.
So Matt Hughes and Dennis Hallman meet in the finals.
Yeah.
Monty?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I've never been more excited for a fight. I mean, I really don't think I've ever been. Two guys that I didn't really know. I knew Hallman from Matt Hume, and I just met Matt, but from what I just saw, Matt beating Manet, which I never would have guessed. I didn't know this guy.
Me either.
Farm boy. And then watching the way that Hallman went through everyone, man, I am just, this is what I do it for here. It's all you people in the audience. Check this out. This is something you can't wait to see. And then it was over. It was over. And, Matt goes unconscious from a triangle or guillotine.
Guillotine.
And he's laying on his back. He's out. The referee, lifts the trunks and wakes him up, and he's just laying there. And I go, you know what happened? And Matt looks up and goes, figuring I lost. Like that. That's what he said. And I go, yeah. I go, got caught in a guillotine. And he goes, gonna have to work on that one. and that was it.
Yeah.
So Matt gets caught and is completely unconscious at the 17-second mark.
Yep.
And I think Hallman even informs the referee that there's an issue on Matt's end. And when we talked to Dennis Hallman in our interview, he had said that they watched Matt and saw how he was shooting in, and they were specifically targeting that one move because they knew they would see it.
Matt Hume ruins everything. He he's so good. He's so smart. He spent years picking off my guys. I got so sick of it that I finally called him and I go, look, I'm waiting. You can't see me, but I'm waving the white flag. Jesus, God, help me. Quit beating up my guys. And I go, what can I do? And he goes, no, it's nothing personal. And I go, look, can I start sending some guys out? And he goes, yeah, that'll be fine. And so, out went all the guys, Spencer Fisher, Pulver, Jeremy Horn, everyone's going out there, to the Hume camp. And Matt Hughes said himself, he goes, I'm telling you right now, he goes, because he lost in Abu Dhabi to Tito in kind of a shitty, they repositioned him in, basically. They went off the mat and they brought him back and put him in the hold that he was in because it was in the third overtime. Mm-hmm. And he wins. And Hume was in the corner. And he goes, I've had it with this Hume guy. He goes, if he's in the corner, I'm not fighting. I'm done with him. And that, he was smart. And of course he had beaten Miletich in extreme fighting, gave Pat his first loss. We hated this guy. We're so sick of seeing him. He hated him with respect. For sure. This guy just is amazing.
Now, Hallman could be a little cocky, though. What was Hallman like in victory? Because, I think that's an amazing feat that people forget that he went on to repeat that later on Matt. And
in the UFC, in Japan.
It makes it more amazing as far as that. But he was the best in that era at catching people, you know?
Yeah.
So was he cocky? What was that like?
You know, he wasn't. I think he was worried because what he'd seen with the Monet thing. I interviewed him for my book. I interviewed him and it got some good stuff. And he said beating Matt the first time wasn't a big deal. No one knew who he was. He goes, now the second time, whole different story. That's the jumping up and down and doing cartwheels. And he said, same thing when he fought Matt the second time in Japan. He said they spent 2 months, him and Matt, that guy, and all he did was run at people, wrestlers, and attack them, and they would pick him up and slam him, pick him up and slam him. He said he gets slammed 20, 30 times a night. And what Hume told him was, if he picks you up and slams you, you hit the ground first, you make the first move. And so they worked on arm bars, triangles, everything he could do from a slam. He immediately went into the move. And then when it happened in Japan, Matt did what wrestlers do. He picked him up, slammed him, and boom, it was over. And you're like, whoa, what happened? How does that not again? But that's that damn Matt Hume.
Matt Hume is, if you look at his fight record, it's deceiving. It's deceiving for who he is as a fighter, and he is a generational a combat sports mind. That's what Matt Hume is. Not an easy guy to deal with, from what I understand, at an administrative level, but he's somebody that always sticks up and fights. He digs in for his fighters, much like yourself, Monty.
Yeah, he and I got along so well.
I could see that.
And I wanted Franklin. I wanted Franklin to go and train with him more than anything. And Rich would say, you know, I'm already the UFC champ, and he goes, I'm comfortable with how it's going. I'm like, come on, man. I go, just give it a chance. And he wouldn't do it. And I said, what if I pay? And you know, if I step up to pay, I'm pretty into it, because that don't happen very often. I don't even pay when my family goes out, you know. So I said, I'll bring him here. And so and then I had to convince Matt Hume to come, you know, to this guy. He says, I'm coming to him. You know, I don't.
It's a seminar.
I'm like,
it's a seminar, Matt. You know? Come.
Yeah. So he shows up, and Franklin telling me the story. He goes, first day, here's this. I walk in the gym, there's Matt Hume. I don't really know him that well, but he looks like a wrinkled up old little guy. And he says, he puts me through a whole bunch of drills that I've never done before, but seemed completely ridiculous. They're in no way are these things useful. What are you doing to me? And the first day he did it. Second day, more drills of the same thing. And he comes in the third day, and he's decided he puts down drills, and I'm going to tell him, get the fuck out of here. I've had it. And instead he goes, great news. He goes, today we're going to roll. And Franklin goes, awesome. Who you got? Who you got for me to roll? And he goes, you're going to roll with me. And Franklin goes, he had to see the disappointment in my face that I'm going to roll with this crippled old bald dude. And he goes, God. And Matt says, how do you want this to go? Do you want me to tap you with you on top, or do you want me to tap you with me on top? And Franklin's like, oh, you know, you're messing with me. No, he was dead serious. And he goes, I'll start out on top. And he said, within a minute, he's tapping. And he goes, okay, hold on now. He goes, all right. You surprised me. I didn't expect it. And he goes, this one, I'm going to tap you with this. And he tells him what he's going to tap him with. And he taps him. And then he taps him again and again. And Rich is lost in his own mind. He calls me and he goes, Monty, do I suck? He goes, seriously, am I a piece of shit? He goes, what's going on? He goes, dude, he tapped me like, he goes, it was the most embarrassing moment of my life. He goes, I couldn't survive a minute with this guy. And I said, he's really good. And he goes, it's just hard to believe. And so he goes, tomorrow's striking. He goes, he goes, I'm going to get a little even tomorrow. He goes, striking I can do. Not with Matt. So he goes in and he goes, Matt just, every time he gets ready to do something, Matt will kick his base foot. He keeps him off balance. He can never set to do anything. And that's the Muay Thai and all that. But he always has him off balance. He goes, I can't even throw a punch. He goes, everything I try, he's way ahead of me. And he goes, I finished that. And he goes, I have a whole new outlook. It's like, what are we doing tomorrow, Sensei Hume? Where can I get you something to eat, Sensei Hume? and he goes, and then they trained, and he made Rich will tell you this. They clashed, those two, very strong personalities. And where they clashed was Hume likes mental games. He thinks it keeps people sharp and it keeps you off balance and you react. So what he would do with Rich out there, they had a cycle of rowing machine, stair climber, it's a cycle, and the record's 32 minutes. So Rich gets out there, and Rich is very competitive. Rich, 31 minutes, sets the thing, and, so next day afternoon he comes in and he looks over and who did 29 minutes? Hume. Son of a bitch. So he gets fired up, gets there, does 28 minutes and something. Next day, 27, Matt Hume. And he's like, he's driving, he called me because he's driving me crazy. He goes, what is wrong with this guy? And so where they clashed, Rich likes to be very organized. Give me a list. At 10 o'clock, I'm going to be here. At 11 here. These are what we're going to work on. Hume will not do that. Won't do it. You show up and you think you're going to roll. And he goes, today we're running the hill. And Rich would go, God damn it. He goes, if I was going to run the hill, I want to know about it. I'll prepare mentally. I get ready for this shit. And Matt would say, oh, I'm sorry. We'll do it different next time. And then, they'd say, we're lifting tomorrow. Everything okay. They'd show up and they go, today we're swimming. And he go, God damn it. I don't want to swim. I want to roll. And that was the battle they had, was Matt was convinced that made Rich better. When they trained together, Rich's kicks and everything, if you go back and look, he improved dramatically with his kicking after he got with Hume. But anyway, that's my story.
Well, just to put a fast conclusion on it, talking about two martial artists of the modern era there that clashed a little bit. Hey, they put it all behind them. They both work for ONE FC now. Matt bought him over, and that's the respect earned among these men. So very interesting. Yeah. They're able to put that stuff behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the respect was there for both, and Matt, that you said Matt has a little bit of a stigma that he's hard to deal with, and I've heard that from a lot of people that But if he's that guy, he's like, being from Indiana, he's like Bobby Knight. Either you love him or you hate the bastard. It's one of the two.
That is a fantastic comparison. To kind of wrap a bow on Matt Hume, Aaron Riley, we had him on earlier this year, had talked about a story of just working out with Matt. Everything is great. And then as everybody's leaving after practice, Matt asks him to stick around and roll a little bit. And he described a situation that was, kind of like a John Wayne Gacy type scene where he just gets murdered. And he's, Aaron Riley is just like, I've never seen anything like this. He changed as a human being, and I was scared for my life. And, with you were talking about mind games, Aaron said he comes into AMC with Matt Hume with a large pedigree, like an incredible background, and he just goes to war with Steve Berger in what is considered like the Gotti Ward of the independent scene. And it's not the Gotti Ward because they never rematched, because Aaron takes a year off. And you're like, well, Aaron, did you get hurt? No, Matt Hume wouldn't allow me to fight. I had to learn his system, his system, and then he allowed me to fight. So essentially, he demands and takes your respect, whether you give it to him or not, he's taking it. And then you follow his lead. And the proof is in the pudding. All you got to do is just look what Matt is produced.
He's a genius. He's that flat out a genius. And I sent Spencer and Pulver out there. These are top notch guys, right?
Yeah.
And they come back and they go, Monty, thanks for nothing. Thanks for nothing. And I go, what? He goes, I go, you didn't learn anything? He goes, oh yeah, learn to tap with my foot, learn to tap with my knee, learn to tap with my head. He goes, tap, tap, tap. And then Spencer will go, Monty, we were getting tapped by amateurs. He goes, the damn amateurs are tapping us. And he goes, what are you doing to us? And I'm like, come on. And Jens goes, it's true. He goes, we don't even want to talk about it. He goes, as far as we're concerned, we've never been to Matt Hume's. And so I call Matt and I go, Matt, what are you doing? Yeah. What? I go, amateurs? He goes, well, they're amateur just because I haven't let them fight pro. He goes, they've been in my system for 6-7 years. And I go, if you have someone tapping these guys, why don't you have them in the UFC? And he goes, I will. He goes, but I don't want to put them in the UFC. I want to unleash them. I'll never forget him telling me that. When I put him in, I want to unleash him. And everyone is going to say, holy shit, where did this guy come from? Who was it?
Of all those guys there, Barnett.
No. Think about it. No one ever heard of. Came out
Demetrius
of
Johnson?
Huh?
Demetrius?
Yes.
That's too early?
Mighty Mouse.
Okay.
Mighty Mouse.
I thought he came.
Whoa.
He unleashed him, and he just rolled the division, right? And that's what he said. And he had it all planned. He goes, no, he's good. He's at this level in this, at this level in this, but this, he goes, he has to be, at 100% the best at all of them. And that's who they were rolling against out there. And he's catching them and stuff like that. And they're like, whoa, he's an amateur,
Monty, I'm looking at the timeline of events, like in kind of doing it in my head. I just threw that out there because it was really the only guy that I knew that had been through a system. But that is shocking to me because he kept it, Matt kept him as an amateur, even though he tapped those guys for a few more years.
Yeah.
After that.
Yeah, he I don't know how they did, and then of course he's a millionaire. I mean, so Demetrius isn't upset. And one thing about that kid, I mean, Matt requires people to be good people, and that's why he kind of, I think with, I hate to say it, but like with Munson and stuff, he wasn't that unhappy when those guys left. It's just they weren't his. They were good, and he taught them, but they weren't his kind of people. But the ones who were, he just cared so much and wanted them to succeed so much, and he had that whole plan laid out. It just blows me away.
If you look at the original student base out of AMC, Josh Barnett, Jeff Munson, Dennis Hallman, Ivan Salaverry, all of them have gyms right now. Anthony Hamlet, too. I think he's one of the original guys, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. All of those guys have their own gyms.
Yeah. Well, they've all learned to coach. I mean, you learn just by osmosis, and like the thing with Demetrius, I saw Demetrius in Vegas. This is maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Time flies when you're old. But Demetrius came downstairs to do something with Matt. I was sitting with Matt at the Hard Rock. And he comes down and he's got like 3 or 4 buddies with him. And he walks in and he stops and he looks at me and he just starts going, holy shit. He goes, guys, this is Monte Cox. He goes, this, and he just starts, I mean, it's almost embarrassing, except, I said, come on, keep going. But that's how, but you forgot good looking.
Yeah.
But no,
Debonair.
But he was such a gentleman and such a just not what you expect from maybe the best pound for pound guy in the world. You maybe didn't expect that, and I didn't maybe that, and I certainly didn't expect. I mean, hell, he walks around with Matt Hume, but then Matt says, he goes, he thinks you're the greatest ever. He goes, I'm just Matt. He goes, I'm nothing. He goes, he sees me every day. I'm the one that makes him eat cauliflower. He hates me.
All right, so Miguel, I've got 1, 2, 3. I got 3 more extreme challenges, or 2 extreme challenges and a Super Brawl. I'd rather hold that off for another time because we're almost at the 2-hour mark, and I'd rather kind of just open it up for conversation for an additional 30 minutes. Because the next one I pulled is Extreme Challenge 29, Best of the Best. It's an 8-man, 180-pound tournament with 6 of the 8 guys having gone to the UFC. And Chris Lido ends up fighting Dave Manet in the first round.
Whoa, what a fight.
Dorkson fights Matt Hughes in the first round. Like, dude, I don't want to go down this path because
I'd love to talk about that one when Chris is with us too.
I would too. That's why I kind of want to save that. And Chris, Monty, I'm not kidding you. He was mad. He was like, I got to do this bare knuckle thing. He really wanted to be here specifically for that tournament. And so I'd like to save that. Maybe next week we can record it when we release it. We can just kind of use it as a buffer. But Miguel, if I can open up, I think we do the John Fitch route. We open up with some tinfoil hat type questions. MMA conspiracies are something that interests all of us. Mine, I need you to look into the camera so I can understand.
Just
whether
don't hit me with the Tom Sauer thing like last time.
I will not, but I need to know if you're lying on this. This is for Crowbar MMA trivia right here.
Okay.
Did Matt Hughes' brother ever weigh in for him?
No.
He delayed.
No, he didn't. You know, it doesn't take much. Now have they done the girlfriend run in the closet and the other guy come out? Yes.
Maybe.
Yes. But you know, really with those two, once you get to know them,
they are different.
Mark is much more. He's got that redheaded tint and everything, and really
heavier.
Yeah. And of course, Matt lived with us for almost a year and a half. So I mean, we don't see any resemblance at all. It takes 1 second to know who's who. But no, to my knowledge, no, we never.
Of course not. Yeah. But hey, listen, we get a tinfoil hat question. We're running with it.
All right.
We love that type of stuff. Sean Sherk, he retired and never really told anybody. There was like a 2-year period where people are like, well, where's he at? And he's working a full-time job, you know, doing construction, like remodeling.
Yeah. That guy, if people knew how hurt he was the last 2, 3, 4 fights, he was broken. I mean, broken. He
physically broken.
Yeah. His knees were so bad he couldn't even take a shot. He couldn't, he fought, he won the title with one arm. He couldn't throw one arm. And that was against starts with an F.
Franca?
Hermes Franca? Oh no.
Frank Yeager?
No, the last name
I'm
is.
gonna get
I'll
look it up so we're not fumbling. Keep going.
Jesus, this is where I usually try to clean up. It's gonna drive me crazy.
Yeah, but for that fight, his arm was, and I believe it was his left, was unusable. Couldn't do nothing with it. And I tried to stop the fight and beforehand and said, I'm not going to let you do it. And he said, Monty, he goes, I can win this fight with one arm. I can do it because I'm not gonna. That's what he said. And he went out and won it all for it. Bleeding. I mean, super bloody fight. Went all 5 rounds.
Yeah, it was Kenny
Florian.
With those elbows, yeah, he was all cut up. Yeah.
But he with that elbow, because he I mean, it was he really had no arm. And then the other fights he was winning, but the takedowns and explosiveness he had, like when he fought Hughes, that was nowhere to be found by the end there. He lost a lot of time in the middle when the UFC cut him after the Hughes fight, and that, he had to go out and get 10 wins on his own out in the small leagues before I could get him back in.
So why does he not tell anybody he retires?
I don't know. He didn't tell me that he retired. He just said, I would call him and say, what do you think? And he goes, Monty, he goes, I can't. He goes, right now, he goes, I'm so broken down, I can't do it. And it just kind of gradually, he just told me he's done. And
wow.
You know, he just walked away.
Do you know what's unfortunate? You've got a guy that, you know, if you know his past, and they had said it during the UFC, he experienced real tragedy as a child, like the worst tragedy a child can experience with a parent. And for him to overcome that experience and push forward, it's kind of like what movies are made of, especially and it culminates in winning that UFC title. For him not to get the proper send off, like from our perspective, it's kind of like when Eve Edwards doesn't win the 155 world title when he knocks out Josh Thompson. It makes me sad. Like, it's just like, sometimes you just got to do the right thing. And sometimes that right thing might cost you a little money, might cost you a little time. But at the end, that's what you have to do because it's the correct thing. And Sean Sherk not getting the proper send off, it doesn't sit well with me.
It was amazing. I mean, his record, I didn't even realize at one time he was like 31-0 or something like that. When he 31-1, I think, when he came back to the UFC, with his only loss being a 5-round close decision to Matt Hughes, and he's not in the UFC.
And he won, like, did he win like 2 of those rounds?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was a 1 point, I think, on all 3 cards. He won 4 and 5. He lost the first 3 and lost 1, 4, and 5.
Think about this. You got a guy that's got a hell of a run. You throw him into a world title fight. He loses by 1 round and you cut him.
But you know why that happened, right?
Well, go ahead. That's the opening for you.
Okay. Yeah. I was waiting for you to give me a part. Well, I couldn't get Sean into the UFC. I started with Sean. I found him when he was an amateur. He fought in one of my amateur shows. And so I got him and started, I saw he was going to be something. He fought a few and I started managing him. We got up to like 20-0, 21-0. And at that time, Dana put the rule out that no more than 2 fighters per weight class per manager. And
that's the Monte Cox rule. That's like
my rule. There was nobody else that affected.
And it's more of an addendum to the locker room bonus. It's like a continuation of targeting you. So go ahead.
Yeah. And so I already had Miletich and I already had Hughes at 70 at that time. So I couldn't get him in. I had Jason Black at 18-0. I couldn't get him in. And so they Dwayne Zinkin kept calling him and saying, "Look, I can get you in the UFC, blah blah blah." But Sean was loyal. He's my guy. And then somehow, and only they could tell you, but the UFC sent a contract for Sean to get into the UFC to Zinkin to present to Sean and say, "Here's the contract. Sign with me, and you sign this contract." And I was doing, just handshakes then. So nothing stopped them from doing that. And Sean called me and he said, "Man," he goes, "Monty," he goes, I'm all about you and all this. He goes, "But I'm never going to get in. And this is my dream." And I said, go ahead and do it. And so he did. He got in, he won 2. When they got to the Matt Hughes fight, Zinkin and those guys, from what I'm told, they just beat the UFC up over the money, just beat the shit out of them. They didn't want to finish they had an existing contract, didn't want to talk about that. This is new. And eventually they needed that fight. And they did the fight. And when he lost, there was no provisions for, when I do things, when I have a guy fighting a title fight and things.
Yeah, you get a return shot.
Oh, I'm kind of known for that everywhere. Every guy, when Tim Sylvia went in, I had a clause that he didn't have to fight Pedro Hizzo for a year because I didn't like the matchup. And, everything is, you just got to look at the
strategy,
and you just got to be smart about it,
Yeah.
And that's how I had Robbie Lawler making 150 and 150 in Strikeforce and not even winning most of the time. It was in the contract. So anyway, they didn't do that. And so the UFC cut it. Not because of Sean. They cut him because they were pissed at his management.
So they were still pissed at the management. It was just a different person.
They were pissed at Zinkin.
Yeah, of course.
Well, he's the one that battled him over the money.
Yeah.
I mean, so they were pissed. As soon as they got a chance, they cut him. And their excuse was what they told Sean, we're letting you go. We don't need another Matt Hughes. We already got one.
Oh.
And so that's why they let him go. Well, so then at that point, Zinkin never gets him another fight. When he was out of the UFC, out of sight, out of mind. And Sean went on. He fought for me a couple times, and I still liked him because I appreciated the way that he left. And he won 10 fights. I think he was 31-1, I believe. And he calls me and he says, "Do you think I can be a world champion?" And I go, "I do, but I think you need to go to 55." And he goes, "If I do that, will you manage me?" And I said, "No, it's a one-time deal. I just can't let everybody, because I do handshakes. I can't let everyone test the grass, on the other side, see if it's greener. And if it's bad, they come back. I mean, everyone will take a free chance. So I can't." And then I think he called me the next day and he said, "I'm going to ask you again." He goes, "Because I got to make a decision. If you won't manage me, I'm going to quit. I'm not going to fight anymore." He goes, "It's you or nobody." And that kind of struck me. That's something that was cool. And I go, "God damn it, we'll do it." And then he did. He dropped weight. He won the world title. And, that boy hadn't lost many fights. What did he lose? 4 or 5?
Yeah, he's 36-4.
Yeah, I mean, and one's Matt Hughes, and and
St. Pierre is one of the other ones.
Who is?
St. Pierre?
Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, damn impressive guy.
Every guy he's lost to has held a UFC title. Frankie Edgar and BJ Penn are the others.
Yeah. And he fought a lot of those guys hurt, man. I mean, he was always you ever seen the video, his training video?
Mm-hmm.
He's insane.
It was unbelievable. Yeah. And he told me, he was really good for my book, because he wanted to talk about the steroid thing and everything. And that whole thing was just a mess. That was what's his idiot? Armando.
Well, here, would you mind if I frame this? Kind of, I do a lead in. Armando Garcia is the California Athletic Commissioner, and he left under tons of controversy. If you Google search his name, it is just one horrible thing after another of incompetence.
Found money, sexual harassment.
The rumor, and I think this really isn't a rumor. I mean, I probably shouldn't say it unless it's a fact, but the belief is that when he was evicted out of the office because he was not allowed to collect his own things, he was told to leave, they found a considerable amount of money in his locker, like a couple $100,000 type dollars. So in essence, what takes place is Sean Sherk and Hermes Franca are going to fight, and both of them fail their pre-fight steroid test. And rather than canceling the fight, they allow them to do battle, only to reveal later on that, hey, you guys failed like a week out, which is unheard of. It screams of incompetence. So go ahead, Monty. I apologize.
Yeah, no, you're right. But then the stuff that they were saying that Sean took, and I'm paraphrasing because he really has this thing down. But I mean, I'll bet he spent $100,000 defending that. And I can look most people in the eye. I know who's lying and who's not. You have to be pretty good to fool me. And I would bet anything that he was crazy. He did not take steroids for that fight. Now, did he ever take steroids before, down the 3 years before or something like that? I don't know. But for that fight that they tested, they went to that lab and they found all kinds of tainted shit. Like they would run one test and then they wouldn't. You're supposed to clean it and all, you sterilize everything. Go again. They were just running the next one, then the next one.
Yeah, you're supposed to run at least 3 tests, like on a positive, because they give you enough urine, minimally 2, normally 3, just to kind of confirm.
But no, what I'm saying is, and then when you're done with the 3, say you do the 3, you move on to the next person, and they're supposed to clean this. They're not cleaning it. And so now remember, after this happened, and they found this out. He got attorneys and everything. They found out this was true. That's when the UFC and California threw these guys out. The guys that were doing all the testing, they got zapped. They were completely incompetent what they were doing. And remember, whatever those nano things are, whatever
nanograms
had he tested for that in New Jersey, they wouldn't have considered that a positive test. There was like a person that took him weeks before would have 100, whatever. He had 16. It was so little that no one else, it was ridiculous. And that's where he was freaking out. And he said, what they're saying I'm taking, he goes, I've never even heard of it. He goes, this is not something I've ever taken or would or whatever. And they pretty much had it proven that this was a false positive and all this, and it was a mistake. And they just wouldn't do anything. And he was running out of money to do it. But that was Armando, who was that guy was evil.
Well, he was evil, and he would just needle, and would just tell you, yeah, sue me. I don't care. It's not my money. It's the state. And Monty, as a caveat to the story, why don't you let everybody know where Armando works currently?
From at least I knew when he left there, he got a job as the head of security for Station Casinos.
He works for Zuffa.
Yep.
That's interesting.
That's very fascinating.
As a fact, something I do know for sure, I was the very first promoter to be fined by the California Athletic Commission after they took over MMA. And that was Armando. And we were doing the 3rd show in California, in San Diego, TJ Thompson and I. And we hadn't lost enough money in other places. We thought we'd go to Cali and give a little. They needed some. And we put on a hell of a show. We had guys like Roger Huerta and Rich Clemente, and we had Matt Linland fighting Van Arsdale, and it was a good show. We drew like 3,500, but everyone else, the 2 shows before us, drew like 15,000. I found out San Diego's maybe not the best place. So Armando shows up at the show and goes, all these fights are 3-minute rounds. And we're like, what are you talking about? These are UFC level guys. These are, 3-minute rounds. That's it. And he was such a dick. And so he walked off, and we started talking to some of the other commissioners. Like, you got to talk to him. This isn't even in the rules. He's just making the shit up. So he lets us do the main event, and everything else was 3 threes with all those guys. So he comes to me 5 minutes before we're ready to start, and he says, I need 20 copies of your insurance. And I'm like, what do you need 20 copies of my insurance for? He goes, that's none of your business. 20 copies. He goes, and I'm not going to start the show till you get them to me. And I'm like, dude, I go, the fax machine was broken at the one pace, and they had one fax thing. Seriously, I go, for me to do this, I'm going to have to go out in the street, drive to Kinko's, make the copies, and come back, and we're ready to start. And he goes, you better get going. And I'm like, I want to say something, and I'm like, the little things going,
you can't
don't do it. So I get in the car, I drive, and I have a bit of an ego. This is tough. And I go and I get the shit done. I come back and I hand it to him. He goes, oh yeah, and here I need 10 of these. I'm like, why did you give these to me last
Start the show.
He goes, it doesn't matter. He goes, nothing's starting. And I'm like, I'm thinking, don't do it. don't do it. And I finally go, fuck you, you fat fucking piece of shit. I go, you want the copies? You get your fat ass in the car. You go to Kinko's and get the copies. I'll wait. And he goes, I'll shut this show down. I go, shut the fucking show down. I'm losing my ass here. I go, do me a favor. Shut the fucking show down. And he just goes stomping off and he grabs TJ. And there he's screaming at TJ and everything like that. And I'm standing inside, just looking. TJ comes over to me and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he starts doing this. Like he scolded me. He goes, what'd that fat fucker say? And I go, that fucker. And I'm yelling, I'm pointing at him and Armando's turning away. He's going, we should just fucking kill him. We should just fucking take him out back, fucking kill him. He goes, do everyone a favor. And he goes, oh, and by the way, they're finding you and you got to stay behind the curtain for the whole show. He goes, see ya. And that was it. And so I had to stay behind the curtain and they fined me $500.
Yo, Monty, I would love to do a deep, and I've actually reached out. We're kind of psychotic here. So Miguel and I always kind of come up with different angles for shows. Obviously, this being one of them, we told you about this months ago. And I would love just to do an entire show featuring people that have dealt with Armando Garcia.
Oh my gosh. It was so bad out there in California. The one guy called me and he goes, Monty, he goes, listen to this. He goes, I get a call at 1 a.m. He goes, I'm home. He goes, I'm a single parent. My kid's sick, 3 years old. And Armando says, I didn't get your contract back or something, whatever it was. And he goes, man, my daughter's sick. Can I do it first thing in the morning? He goes, you have 30 minutes to get me that contract or I'm turning down your license. You're not going to have your show. He goes, but my kid's sick. He goes, 29 minutes. So the guy gets his kid up, goes into the Kinko's, as everyone did then. And it's like a 20-page. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but he sent back the 20 pages. So before he leaves, thank goodness, he calls him back and he goes, did you get it? And he goes, no. He goes, this is unacceptable. He goes, the contract comes in order. Page 1, page 2, page 3. He goes, this is all messed up. He goes, resend it to me in order. It's 20 pages, not 1,000. Would have taken him 6 seconds. That's the prick he was.
Yeah, that's not cool.
And now he's working for the UFC. So let me just kind of.
He was. It's been years since that was when I was told that's where he went.
So let me just kind of bring a few things back. And I know we usually like to try to go to an order here. With Sherk going to Dwayne Zinkin, the one thing that bothers me, other than the totality of what took place and how it went down, the one thing that bothers me is that when he signed the contract, there were people cheering about this evil idea, just going, ha, 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 ha. We did it. Like, that's some evil shit, man. It really is. Like, that's some overtime thinking evil shit.
It was different back then. I mean, once I took Jen's and walked with the belt, that was the end of me having anything decent.
Amicable.
Yeah, with them. I mean, Dana was smart enough to know that we were never going to be able to get along. So he got Joe Silva, and Joe and I became really good friends, and we were able to work together. We didn't, I didn't always agree. We battled. We didn't talk to each other for a month at a time when something bad would happen, or I fighting for money. But then one day after we settled it, he'd call and go, hey, what's up? Because it's over. That was it. It's
just business.
Joe was awesome, man. I mean, people don't realize how good he was. I mean, he really was good at keeping everything, all those guys, keeping them getting along. I mean, the egos and the stuff. You see how it's out of control now. These guys are all going all over the place. Covington's doing this and McGregor's doing that. I mean, they didn't have any of that like that back then.
No.
It's weird.
Chael Sonnen, he fought for you against Terry Martin.
And Jeremy.
Oh, Jeremy. We talked about it. We actually interviewed Chael. We talked to him about Jeremy, and he just admitted exactly what it is. You and Jerry both said, can't beat him. Can't beat him. And, you know, the crazy thing about Chael is when you see what he does against Trevor Prangley, and I wasn't able to bring this up in the interview, you see him leveling up. In his first fight, he's on top of Trevor, and he's throwing punches down, and he's yelling at the referee, tap, 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 but the referee's not, like, listening to him. And he loses that fight, loses a second fight against him. And then the third fight in the UFC, you can see between round second and third, the referee's ready to start the fight. Chael goes, no, I'm not ready yet. Have him wipe that grease off of his eye where he's got the cut. And you see, like, the referee following his instruction. It's just, you saw him leveling up and how to move parts around. It's just, he's such a brilliant mind. However,
he's funny.
And he can tell a story.
He's funny. And that, I mean, if you pulled up the battle that he and I had online, it's pretty funny shit. I mean, and we get along fine, but he's ripping the Extreme Challenge and ripping me. And it's not even real. He says, yeah, you ever been to one of those Extreme Challenges? You know, hell, the locker room is a mop closet. He goes, the cage, half the time the cage falls down. The ref never shows up. He goes, you know, blah, blah. And he's just ripping it. You ever been to a Monte Cox show? And so I said, you know, I can see where he thinks that, because if I was 0-3 in an organization, I wouldn't be very happy with them either. You know,
0-3.
There's something else I think in there, but and then I was talking about, he said, yeah, the fight with Martin that you brought up, yeah, that fight was going back and forth and I said, the only thing going back and forth was Martin's hands on his face. I said, he beat the shit out of Chael, and Chael quit on his stool. He quit on his stool.
What did Chael get paid for that?
500 maybe? Yeah. 500 to 500.
Yeah, it's a going rate then.
That was my standard for them.
Yeah. Hard fight.
But I mean, it was, I mean, Martin just beat the shit out of him. And that was my thing. Dude, you quit on your stool. You just didn't want to go anymore, you know. But yeah, it was funny. You know, we're going kind of back and forth, but and I have had some shitty locker rooms, I gotta admit.
I mean, Lakemore isn't a real big venue to begin with.
500 shows.
Yeah, the Lakemore was kind of a broom closet, but it was
small.
It also stored chairs.
So
where do you want me to put it?
Yeah, no, for sure. Monte, always a pleasure, man. Honestly, the historical impact that you've had on mixed martial arts, it is an absolute honor and pleasure to continuously have you on here, and your views and the sound bites we get from you, man, absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Now I get to go home and wait, and I cringe when you guys send out your highlights and see what I said that you picked out to make people, you're trying to get me killed.
They're fantastic.
Dark.
They're absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. I'm glad I moved out of Iowa.
Wait, buddy, real quick. Were those rules for the cage made specifically geared to keep promoters like Chad Mason from operating in Iowa? He
was nowhere around at that time, but it was meant to keep people like that. You know,
but one day I'm going to want some Chad Mason stories out of you. I've heard some incredible highlights that I need confirmation on.
And you know, he's such a good guy now. He's so different.
Is he really?
He's a nurse. He's got a little girl he takes care of, and he supports so many different things. He says, I was a piece of shit. He goes, I just did, you know, but yeah, no, he's a different guy now. He really is.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
I just talked to him like 2 days ago.
Really?
Yeah. Are you still taping?
Yes.
Yeah, we are. We can cut that off.
Stop taping and I'll tell you something.
We can cut that off.
Let me sign off real fast then. You know, Mike, when we went over it, we love interviewing the fighters and we get to go deep with everybody. But I said it. I said, Monte has a fighter, 15 fighter stories for every show. You know what I mean? It's like he's a source. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you kind of signing up, for coming on down the line and keep it going and stuff, because we were going to do 6 shows and we did 3. And we could have kept it on the first one, I think, So
oh yeah.
Thank you very much, Monte. I know Chris is going to be jealous he missed it, but we'll be back with Chris Leiter versus Dave
Yeah.
today. We'll pick it up there.
Little preview for another part. Extreme Challenge 29, Extreme Challenge 46, Extreme Challenge 47, which we're not going to concentrate too much on 47, and the greatest heavyweight tournament ever held on U.S. soil, which you were part of, which was Super Brawl 12, or Super Brawl 24.
Well, and those Extreme Challenges were the prelims for that.
There you go.
There we go. So
excellent. Thank you, Monty. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And so there it is, Monte Cox, Extreme Challenge deep dive. Mike, we went long again.
Well, Miguel, this is the thing. This is a permanent fixture of our podcast, and we knew we were going to go down there. We just needed to, down this path. We just got to kind of get it right. So now that we know that the rabbit holes that you, Miguel, can take people down, like with with Cass Daniels and stuff like that, the little footnotes in MMA history that 99% of the world may not be familiar with. It's incredibly fascinating. You being on the computer and being on top of it, it just kind of shined a light, not only just on your internal knowledge of what was going on back then, but you cleaning things up. It's definitely a keeper. We're going to keep doing it, but it also opens up doors to, Miguel, your Bodog shows, your Euphoria shows, your Hook and Shoot, as well as maybe some of your ADCC stuff about how some of those matches came about. It's a permanent thing. I'm thinking maybe we just do one event, one episode. Maybe it goes 45 minutes. If it does, we release it on a Wednesday instead of our normal Monday, Friday release. We're going to play with it, but I know I thought it was really good. It was a fun listen. I mean, what was your thoughts, Miguel?
Yeah, I got a feeling Monty will be back. You know what I mean? He's tied to too many shows and too many big things, and he fits real well in our format here. I wish we had Chris aboard. That's all.
Well, and that's what we're going to do next. But here, listen, we got the IFC with Paul Smith. Obviously, we got to do that. We got Ted Williams with Gladiator Challenge, Terry Treblecock with King of the Cage. I mean, there's certain, there's certain shows that we're definitely going to cover, and it's not just limited to Monty, but Monty is. He's been good to us first and foremost. And secondly, he, like you said, he fits into our format, but there's other promoters and people. Danger Zone. Maybe we can pull somebody from Danger Zone. We covered Dan Severn in this. There's a little kind of shady dealings in the Pat Miletich fight. Maybe we pull over somebody from Danger Zone, talk about what took place in that organization. They did at least 50 events. They're 50 Fight Club members. I don't know. I
think it leaves the door wide open for a lot of stuff. For now, I think people are going to enjoy Monte Cox on some of the early Extreme Challenges here.
I agree. Please like, share, subscribe. We're going to be doing Patreon too. If you guys like what we're doing and you want to get involved, our Patreon, we're going to allow people to sit in with us on the prep meetings, which we're obviously in need of more to do. We're going to do prep meetings. You guys can sit in if you want to contribute. Great. If you just kind of want to understand where the roadmap is going for the next or future interviews, that'd be awesome as well. So like, share, subscribe. All the links are in the bio, and I appreciate your listening.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.